We're going to dive a little deeper into AI. We had a really great conversation last night at a pairings dinner where we talked about the fact that every company either is or will be a software company, or probably won't be around over the long term. And within that sort of corpus is AI and all its various connotations. We have today with us, three experts, really deep experts in this area, and we'll have a chance to hear a little bit from each one of them about their particular areas of expertise. But let's dive in. Maybe we could briefly, talk about what you do in your world, and I think that'll give us some sense of where you come from. What I'd like you to also share with us is what does AI mean to you? And if you're willing, Mahesh, why don't you start off?
Sure, absolutely. So maybe we can just start with the definition of intelligence, which always is the controversial one, before we go to the artificial element of intelligence. So intelligence, at least to me, is the ability to gather data, gather information, and at the same time be able to extract in concepts from that data and information, connect those concepts together, and apply that in a knowledge framework to accomplish some sort of goal. Right, so that's intelligence, and that's an iterative process where it's continuously adapting, where you're learning more and being able to accomplish your goal better. The artificial element of it is just basically doing that with computation that resides outside the human element here, oftentimes with humans part of the loop in many cases. So that is how I and we at Motorola Solutions frame intelligence and artificial intelligence more broadly. We're all about mission critical communications. We connect people in times of need. And a big element of what we're doing now is extending each individual's sensory intelligence, being able to increase their awareness, and for them to be able to communicate with the world in a way they'd be able to communicate with other humans, the ability to ask questions of the world. Is there something anomalous happening here? Is someone at risk, a person who falls down on a stairway, as an example? Are we able to pick that up and bring the right person to react to it? That's basically it.
And Mahesh, by the way, is a expert in AI, but in particular has founded companies in drives and the vision side, computer vision in particular. Jay Doss?
Yeah, so I'm managing director with Sapphire Ventures. We are a late stage venture growth investor, investing mostly in enterprise software, managing about 4 billion or so. We look at a lot of investments in artificial intelligence, machine learning. We have a bunch of them. For us, the one of the things that I think you mentioned, that software is eating the world, and now, of course, you hear the term that AI and machine learning is eating software, right? So it is basically, it's not just all of our portfolio companies. Everybody now has a way, how they can kind of, use the data that they have, and make their solution, their product, their service better. So we kind of are looking not only at companies that are, doing fundamental research or making it easier to work with AI and machine learning, but also seeing how our portfolio companies are, adapting and kind of using the data they have to make with machine learning, make it a lot better.
Please.
I'm David Yang. I started 12 companies, and many of them in AI space. For me, AI obviously it's a new electricity. If this is a driver of fourth industrial revolution, if before we our mankind industrial revolution, the problem of power, of physical power, during first and second industrial revolutions, now we're solving another problem. We have a challenge of making decisions. It's not a problem to move this stone from here to here. It's a challenge to understand where to move, when to move, should we move. So it's a knowledge, and this is how AI helps us now to make faster and more accurate decisions in everywhere. And any company which will not change their electricity now to AI will be out of the business in many years. So it's the AI will happen in every little element, in handwriting, in pen, in this lamp. Everything will be now about making faster, smarter decisions?
I am one of the general partners at Sway, and yesterday I was having a discussion with my colleague Carl Carson, and he made one comment that kind of stuck in my mind, which is the next generation, our kids, they seem to be smarter and more versatile than the previous generation, than us, and definitely they are more exposed to technology with cell phones. Every device around them is an intelligent device. There is better technology that's going into to almost anything. But then on the business side, there is no company that comes looking to raise some money that doesn't have an AI strategy and a machine learning strategy. So this technology is ubiquitous, and one of the questions that I have here for the panel is how do you see that transforming the business world? How this intelligence, automation is going to impact today's technologies and products and services and the efficiencies in the companies. And maybe, David, you can start from there.
Yeah, if we're talking about overall digital transformation, let's look at the box which called enterprise. Every enterprise now becomes digital enterprise. It means it has some kind of digital input and digital output. So even agriculture right now, with the drones flying and measuring the fields, and self-driving tractors which go and actually plant. So even a farm now becomes a digital enterprise. Now let's look at what happens inside the enterprise. Employees. But employees also becoming digital employees because they have, again, digital input and digital output. And we see this picture, now we understand two major, completely tectonic changes which happen. First, called RPA, robotic process automation. This is changing the way employees now making their job. It's software robots which actually replacing part of actual employee with software assisted functions. Second part, which I call biological part of our employees, it will stay anyway. I don't know, maybe next 20, 50 years, whatever. Biological part will remain still. So that part is now transforming with what called AI people analytics. So AI now thinks about how we as a biological employees making our decisions, whether we are happy, engaged, efficient, and actually now new AI people analytics technologies actually disrupt the way enterprises think about their workplace.
Yeah, so for us, when we think about machine learning and AI, we kind of look at the analogy of analytics, right? So there's like two trends there. One, if you look at how enterprises are set up nowadays, you have an analyst team that is basically looking at data and telling you what happened in the past. And then you have a data science team, which is kind of, there to take somewhat the same data, run their models, and tell you what is going to happen in the future. And it's like, why do you need two different teams? Because, as you're running a business, it's like you see what's happened in the past and then you predict the future. And and the reason why this is there in these two teams are, is that because people don't really understand how machine learning and AI and predictive models work, because you really have to be a statistician, you really have to know a data scientist to do that. So one of the things that we are kind of focused on is finding areas where, to really make machine learning and AI simple and easy, so that, the way, you started out with tools like, MicroStrategy and Cognos and Business Object, and are now at Tableau, and Power BI. So there's a journey to be had, even on the machine learning and AI side, so that, I don't know how enterprises can become more efficient with it, but, we are trying to invest in tools that will enable these enterprises to actually figure out.
So I sort of gravitate to a really good quote that one of my professors way back when had is Herb Simon. He won the Nobel Prize for economics, but was actually a professor of computer science and cognitive psychology. And he said, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. We're in the world today where that wealth of information, we're incredibly rich when it comes to information. And in many of the challenges that we tackle in the areas that I focus in, we need decision makers to make really good decisions with hopefully all the information that they need in incredibly stressful situations. But attention bandwidth of humans is something that has not grown over the past years, arguably actually has gone a little bit less than what it has been. So that wealth of information is not actually always benefiting decision makers in the right situations. What we are doing is really increasing attention bandwidth with AI. And I think that is a pattern that we see across not just the tasks that we're interested in, but across the industry, where that wealth of information applied with the right attention enhancements to augment human intelligence is really having a lot of powerful uses.
So that's a really a nice segue to the next section of the conversation. But by the way, my name is Ken Denman. I'm a venture partner at Sway. One of my last company, which we sold to Apple, was in the computer vision, behavioral cogs space, deep learning, and it was basically at a pixel level measuring the muscles of the face and scoring an expression and from which you could infer emotion. So Apple took that and did, of course, doing other things with it. You know, if you have an iPhone 10, that Face ID thing under the covers is probably where they got most of that stuff from. But it takes us into the point of biometrics and the ability of systems, whether it's computer vision or language or the natural language processing, writing or audio, to take information and do task for us, extend that sort of attention bandwidth that you're talking about. So let's talk a little bit about the implications of that, because there's always going to be the ethics questions. You know, what are the implications of machines being able to know more about us? And I'd love to hear, you know, where do you think the regulator on that thought is? Is it looking at the data carefully? Is it, you know, where do people make decisions as they try to audit AI? Well, where do we manage the sort of ethical privacy side of AI as we move forward?
Absolutely. So I think at a base level, for any given task, as product designers, with or without AI, we always have to parameterize the decision framework around some set of ethical constraints that we have to adhere to. And an AI system should adhere to those same constraints as well. AI systems today are inductive in nature, so they learn by examples. You give them examples and they learn. There are unsupervised learning techniques out there as well. But fundamentally, they reflect the bias that is in the data. And if the data are constructed by a set of people, set of humans, creating that sort of labeled input-output mapping, the AI will also learn those same set of biases. So many of the questions of morality, I think there's a recent, somewhat recent work out of MIT on something called Morality Engine, where they crowdsourced data creation. So crowdsourcing data creation, crowdsourcing the questions of morality and making certain judgments of data is one of the ways in which data itself can be not necessarily made unbiased. That's rarely completely possible, but it is weighted to be more in sync with what society more broadly considers to be moral or ethical pursuits. The third element of this is really the ability to ask the AI to explain itself. And I think a few people mentioned transparency in AI. Today, AI, for the large part, you talk about neural networks and other things today, it's a black box. You get an input, it gives you an output, perhaps with a confidence that says, you know what, this is how my level of certainty with this decision. And that's really what most users of this information rely on to take their next step. And sometimes that is insufficient. You need to be able to ask the question, how did you arrive at that decision? That transparency of how that decision was arrived to is something that is also critical in this process. putting it all together, I think those are things that are active areas of research, early days, but it is something that really does require a fair amount of attention for us to make solid progress on this.
I think the fundamental issue is that technology is out there, and it really depends on the society and the people there, what they think and how they want to deploy it, right? People in China, Face Plus Plus, whatever, I forget the name of actually the company that's been just raised 300 million or 500 million. But that is being used to track everybody, and to a point where they track people in the, and then put them, because they don't match the profile of the typical, the Chinese population, and that's how they kind of figure out. But the same kind of technology is used in London with the video cameras out there tracking people, and doing the same thing. Now, is one better than the other? So this is really, and the conversation we have will be very different if you went to another society and another culture, because some things where people in the US might think, or in Europe might think, it's invasion of privacy, or, it's non-ethical what these algorithms are doing, might not be a big deal somewhere else because they're just, used to it, or the culture permits that. So I think we, all of this, having the algorithms being transparent, having all of these things is very, very critical and important. But I think just like everything else, technology, will be out there, and people will use it for good things and bad things. And what people think is a bad choice or a good choice will generally depend on the context of where you are.
So, Jay, would that imply, for instance, in China, maybe there's not so much of a choice there, the government structure, the government makes a decision. In the UK, they've obviously made a decision, not the same kind of government structure. So, and the question is fundamentally, will the US take a different approach? Will at some point, for instance, in the US, we trade off a sense of greater safety, for example, for less privacy?
Well, we do that already. We give all our data to Facebook and to LinkedIn. So how is that any different, right? And to Google, right? If you have Google Home or Alexa in your house, it's like they're listening and knows everything they're doing, and it's kind of scary, right? You take all the pictures with your Google, with your phone, and then all of a sudden Google Photos says, "Hey, this is where you have been." So they're tracking you. So how is that any different, right? So, but in some ways, people like it because my kids are like, "Hey, great! It found all of this stuff, and now I can show this whole journey of my vacation to my friends." So
there's an inherent cost benefit that we just make intuitively.
Intuitively, and I think it is a hard question because I don't know there's a right answer for this.
Okay, David.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that ethical question is very, very critical, especially when we apply AI to people and to analyze people's behavior. Microsoft is doing workplace analytics. We're doing here now AI people analytics. I think that the binary is the purpose why we are doing that. So, for example, our AI technology, we managed to train our neural network to predict resignations of employees before people decide to resign. 12 months before they have little changes in their behavior, which happen 6 months and 12 months before resignation. And yeah, it will lead to resignation if nothing will change. So now the question, why our customers are applying these technologies? Because they actually want to improve the workplace to make this company a better place to work. So that makes the difference. If the purpose of analytics is actually to improve efficiency, improve happiness, that's the difference. So I think that when we're discussing ethical questions about AI, we should discuss the purpose.
2 weeks ago, McDonald's spent $300 million buying an AI software company. So they didn't just go and implemented a solution from some vendor. They went and bought the whole company. And it was a little bit surprising to see that. The question that I have is AI seems to be everywhere. Every company is afraid to be behind the curve. And is trying to acquire the skill set, the engineers to be able to develop and automate as much as possible. So maybe in your respective areas, David, you have a startup right now which is based on AI for predicting resignations and HR. Jay, you invested very successfully in a large number of companies and had great successful exits. And Mahesh, yourself, you sold a company which is around computer vision and AI to Motorola. Maybe you can speak a little bit as to the relevance of AI to the large companies and how it is being implemented and value is being extracted from it.
Well, it's many things are very calculatable. For example, Deloitte has estimated that unwanted attrition drives on average 2 annual salaries of losses for the companies. For a 10,000 employee organization, it's actually converts to $100 million a year losses by unwanted attrition. So the employee wants to stay originally. The company wants employee to stay, but finally, because of little frustrations, they leave. So will it help millions and tens of millions of dollars to save and to make the employees happy? Yes. So a lot of things now completely changing when AI can understand what happened in the past, what happens today, and actually what will happen in the future. So that technology is actually add revenues to the top line. They add profits to the bottom line. So it's, I mean, it's inevitable. Google Analytics completely changed the way we think about product development and sales. Now that type of analytics now comes to HR, people, and everywhere.
Yeah, no, the AI and machine learning is a board level discussions in Global 2000 right now, right? We hear it from our CXO network. When we kind of talk about some of our, more AI automation companies like both ThoughtSpot and DataRobot, they kind of, it's amazing. They get access to the CEO almost at the first meeting because everybody wants to learn, how they can use AI and machine learning to make their businesses more efficient. So there is a huge lot of demand. The challenge is that there's a high level, just like anything else, a high level kind of objective to kind of make our business more efficient. But it's when you go down in the weeds, people still don't understand. Okay, how do we make it more efficient? How does it work? So there is a lot of work still to be done in all of these companies. And I think what McDonald kind of did with dynamic yield, right? So they basically are trying to predict, there's so many things in a restaurant business when you have low margin business, and especially you're going to get attacked by Uber Eats and DoorDash. There's a ways that they're trying to figure out how the churn is less, what menus to provide. So, they have understood that they need somebody with a domain expert who has done this to get into the enterprise. And you will see more and more, companies buying vertically specific machine learning oriented companies just to get better information and ability to use what they have built within their enterprises.
And speak of the devil, we can talk about Motorola Solutions buying Mahesh's company, Avigilon.
Absolutely. So I think ultimately we think of it as there are 3 dimensions to the problem. The data that you have, the algorithms and the techniques that you have in place, and the domain knowledge to apply that in a very clear and purposeful way. With Avigilon, and more broadly speaking with some of the other recent MSI acquisitions as well, the key has been we bring to bear some unique domain knowledge in the public safety realm, in the security realm. We have access to proprietary data that gives us competitive advantage when that AI is applied in the right way to that proprietary data. And putting it all together, we're able to create a unique product. And if that template, that formula applies, then it is something that you want to have in-house. At the same time, there are many capabilities that don't require either the proprietary data or the domain knowledge. It is something that is a transformation that we can apply to data that makes it useful to us. With Avigilon, something we are a user of. And so from that perspective, with Avigilon and MSI, we brought in all those 3 dimensions: proprietary data, proprietary domain knowledge, all leading to a competitive advantage that was better in-house.
Great. Well, we're trying to cover a lot of ground in a short period of time. And I'm going to allow for one quick question before we turn it back to Greg. And so if there's a question, yes, sir.
please don't take this in any wrong way. You've all talked about AI creating better efficiency, and I'm all for it. That's a big thing. But I see AI as also having value in increasing productivity. What I mean by that is not just cost saving, but actually making sure the false positive and false negative decision making are less frequent, less destructive.
Great point, and I'll let the panel respond.
I completely agree, right? I think it's all going to be assisted. Machine learning and AI is all about assisting people to be a better decision maker, being more efficient, doing their jobs, better. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely not all about cost.
Yeah.
From my perspective, the most powerful adaptations of or uses of AI are those that actually drive, as you say, productivity. But I would say, looking at the chief digital officer's revenue production, driving more efficient delivery of value to customers, which drives the top line.
And you know what? We particularly focus on high velocity human factors problems. This is where people are trying to take decisions in moments of stress. And in moments of stress, your decision making capability, your ability to absorb information, to effectively make the right calculations is difficult. And that is where you are most in need of that increased attention bandwidth and that decision support to prevent you from making that wrong decision, whether it's that false positive, false negative.
Yeah. And
it's absolutely agree with that. Humans also make decisions, also have false positive, false negatives, and so that it's always a comparison whether it's still better than, and you can measure that.
And in closing, I would just point out that we're on a journey, and we're, as someone said last night, we're probably at about 10%, or maybe we're at the second inning. Boeing just found out they have a ways to go as a software company. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much to the panel.
Thank you.